Welcome everyone. James Walker here, political reporter for The National. Today we are at Bute House with the First Minister of Scotland, John Swinney. Hello, John.
Hello, James.
Thank you for having us. How are you?
My pleasure. I'm great. I'd like to welcome you here.
Excellent. Let's just fire straight in.
Of course.
Last week you said that a genocide is happening in Gaza. You've already said that you are considering Ross Greer's suggestion of a state boycott of Israel. What's to consider?
There's lots of issues to consider about the steps that we've got to take on all the action in relation to Israel. So what I'm looking at is a whole range of different measures that will go in a measure to fulfil what I consider to be essential, which is that I've got to explore every possible avenue I can take to ensure that we are doing all that we can to make our voice heard on the issue of Gaza and to make sure that we take all the practical steps that we can possibly take. So that's the work I'm doing to ensure that we leave no stone unturned in determining what more we can do to apply the pressure to the Israeli government. And we have to acknowledge that there are limitations to what we can do, but we will explore every possible avenue.
You say range of measures. Would you like to elaborate on range of measures?
Well, it's about making sure that I satisfy myself that we're doing absolutely everything we possibly can do. So that's the approach I'm taking to the situation we find ourselves in. You know, we've, over the course of the conflict in Gaza, which has now been going on for the best part of 2 years after the start of the conflict in October 2023, we've taken a consistent stance that we believed there was a need for a ceasefire, and we've been called, my predecessor Hamza Yousaf was calling for that probably as early as late October 2023 as the scale of the conflict became clear, and that has been our consistent stance ever since. What I have to satisfy myself about now, with the enormous escalation in suffering that is being experienced by the people of Gaza, that absolutely everything we can do is being done. And that's where I am in my thinking just now.
So when it comes to range of measures, though, if we could go into a little bit of detail here. So, for example, the Scottish Government has provided grant funding for firms that are supplying Israel with weapons. Are you considering, as part of that range of measures, for example, stopping giving grant funding to the likes of Leonardo, Base Systems, giving Scottish public money to firms that are supplying Israel with weapons? Is that part of is that what you're considering?
That's obviously an area that we look at, of course, and that's part of what we also agreed with Parliament that we would look at when we debated the issues around about the approach taken by Scottish Enterprise in relation to any financial support for companies involved in munitions activity. And we've got a very hard line, and it's a line that's contested and it's challenged, that we won't support companies, we won't support the production of munitions. That's our hard line, and we get criticised for taking that hard line, and we apply that hard line. I'm very confident that hard line is applied. The question that flows from that is that, of course, in some circumstances there are other arrangements that are put in place with companies where we are perhaps supporting employment creation and training within Scotland, and that adds a level of complexity to the whole process, because what I can be absolutely certain about is that we are not funding munitions.
I understand that, but I would say certainly a lot of people would argue that's a bit of a weak argument. I mean, you come from a business background, you understand how cash flow works in businesses. Even if that funding is ring-fenced, it's certainly going to be a good, it's going to be good for the cash flow of the business in general.
Well, I think
if it's not going directly, it is still to the company's benefit.
I understand that point, but there's also, there are defence requirements of Scotland. Scotland is part of an island nation. We require, for example, shipbuilding resources to support the maritime defence of the United Kingdom, because nobody wants to see us vulnerable to an attack from Russia. I certainly don't want to. Of course, we're living in a world where that's now much more of a relevant factor than it's perhaps been at any other stage in my life. So I want to be as helpful as I possibly can do here, and be as robust as I possibly can be, because I want to do nothing, absolutely nothing, that in any way assists Israel to be able to carry on doing what they're doing, because I am disgusted and appalled by what Israel are doing. It is beyond comprehension. But there are complex arguments that have to be worked through to make sure we can take a robust stance. But I give you the assurance that we are doing everything we possibly can do and are exploring every possible avenue to maximise the effectiveness of our stance.
Another avenue that I would like to ask whether you're considering, South Africa's genocide case against Israel. You've already said in public that it's a genocide. Yeah. Is the Scottish government considering backing that case?
Well, on a case like that, you would get into the territory, and I think we discussed this on one previous occasion, where Scotland does not have the negotiating place to argue for that case in terms of international action, because these issues will be reserved to the United Kingdom.
I understand the reserve,
government.
But even if it doesn't have enormous
what
weight
said,
from that perspective, even if it were just to say publicly as First Minister of Scotland in your personal capacity, for example, that you back that case.
I've made it clear that I think there's a genocide going on in Gaza. I've said that.
Would you like to see the Scottish government backing it if we were to be independent, for example?
That's a slightly different question. But what I'm saying very clearly is that I consider what is going on in Gaza to be a genocide.
Okay. The Ferret revealed after an FOI battle that Angus Robertson described the Scottish government as a, quote, critical friend to Israel, while privately arranging a meeting with Israeli diplomats last summer. Yes or no, do you agree Scotland is a critical friend of Israel?
No, we're a critic of Israel.
On to independence. At least 43 SNP branches are opposing your indyref2 plan. A separate meeting has been set up against the strategy as well. Why do you think this is going to work?
I think it's going to work because it's an essential requirement to ensure that Scotland becomes independent. I'm not interested in just arguing about independence. I want to deliver independence. You can't deliver independence unless your country has domestic and international legitimacy. And that comes about, as we all agreed in 2014, by a referendum on the question of Scottish independence, the rules of which are agreed across the board so that everybody is bound by the process. Now, I was bound by the process in 2014. I was, of course, bitterly disappointed by the outcome because I wanted Scotland to vote yes, and I gave everything I could to try to make that the case. So I want Scotland to be in a position to become an independent country, and therefore we have got to have legitimacy domestically and internationally around that. And that's where we're in a logjam, because the UK government is folding its arms and saying, well, none of this is good enough. So what I think the UK government needs to hear is an emphatic vote from the people of Scotland electing a majority of SNP MSPs, because that's what we did in 2011, and that's what delivered the referendum in 2014.
Okay, but you've seen the polls. You know, none of them predict an SNP majority. Is this just a way to take indyref2 off the agenda until a more convenient time? Is this you putting it on the back burner?
This is me putting independence centre stage in our campaigning, and I've made it in the other material which I've shared with the National in terms of the writing that I've contributed to the paper. I've set out that absolutely at the heart of the SNP's election campaign next May will be a positive front-footed argument for Scottish independence, because it is a crying urgency that Scotland is independent. So let me give you an example. I was just airing this argument the other day there. We're doing everything we can in Scotland to reduce child poverty. I want to eradicate child poverty. We're making progress. We're seeing child poverty reducing in Scotland, but it's going up in the rest of the UK. So there's a policy choice through self-government. So we are making headway on what I think is a critical component for our country. But the UK government is about to take a set of decisions on benefits that on their own modelling will increase child poverty levels in Scotland. So there's a classic argument for the urgency of independence. You've got a Labour government in London. Everybody thought once the Labour government was elected, everyone would be fine and would be rid of the Tories and all the awfulness. But we're still getting the awfulness, because despite our best efforts in Scotland to reduce child poverty, child poverty will increase because of the actions of a Westminster government. So that's your urgency argument on independence. That's why I think independence is urgent. But I want us to be in a position to do something about it. And you see, the other proposals that are coming forward, they don't carry domestic and international legitimacy. Nobody will say, well, that's a clear mandate for independence. It won't be said. And it's not, I just won't mislead people. There's not if there was an easy way to do it, I would, you believe you me, I would be right there trying to make it happen. But we need hard choice by the people of Scotland to emphatically back the SNP, because that's what happened in 2011, and that's what got us a referendum. The crucial point of that is that 2011 created a precedent. We know what it looks like. We know how we can shape the debate and how we can apply the pressure. And that's how we do it.
Mm-hmm. And I want to move to a book that everyone seems to be talking about. Your predecessor, Nicola Sturgeon's soon-to-be-released memoir, Frankly. Have you chatted to her about it?
We've talked about it in the past, yes.
Without wanting to sort of divulge any details, or do you want to elaborate on that?
No, we've talked about it.
And did what do you think she's written about you, for example?
I have absolutely no idea, but we'll soon see.
And is it, I mean, you must be. Have you been able to see an advanced copy, or have you?
I've not seen the book. I've seen the extracts. I've followed the news coverage about these extracts, and I'm sure it'll be an interesting read.
Mm-hmm. And when was the last time you spoke with Nicola?
Over the last few weeks.
Mm-hmm. I've got, just to break it up a little bit, I want to ask you a bit more of a random question, although it's related to Spider-Man 4 obviously being filmed in Glasgow currently. What's your favourite superhero?
My favourite superhero? Oh my goodness. That's interesting. I suppose depends what you put into the classification of superheroes. I suppose, would Sean Connery as James Bond come into superheroes?
Well, I think perhaps not. But if it's your superhero,
well,
it's your superhero.
There you are.
Fair enough. I want to move to energy now. The Labour-run administration in Cardiff has set up its own publicly owned energy company. I'm not going to try to pronounce it in Welsh, but it translates to Green Electricity Wales. It was set up in 2024. Just last month, it announced plans for 3 wind farms on publicly owned Welsh woodlands. If Wales can, why can't Scotland?
Well, the type of project that I would want to see us undertaking would be one that would be in a position to significantly contribute towards reducing the energy costs of people in Scotland. And I think what we're learning from the experience of the United Kingdom and the arrangements about the energy market is that these issues are fundamentally controlled by the Westminster system. And if we want to do something about that, we've got to change the constitutional arrangements to give us the ability to change the way in which the electricity market operates so that it can operate in the best interest of the people of Scotland, so that what we generate here is utilised to the benefit and the betterment of people within Scotland.
But if you can just explain to me, again, so if Wales can take those measures, are there particular constitutional arrangements in Scotland that are preventing us from doing that?
Well, I think what I'm trying to say to you is that if you want to do something that's going to make a meaningful difference in the lives of people in Scotland, it's the constitutional arrangements need to change to enable that to be the case.
Mm-hmm. Moving on, last week you addressed the Global Offshore Wind Investment Forum in Edinburgh, and you stressed the, quote, importance of ensuring that planning decisions are taken timeously. Why has it taken more than 18 months to decide on the fish farm in Loch Long, more than 2 years to decide on the hotel in Aviemore, and how long will the decision on Sochiol's ABC take?
Obviously, individual planning applications are considered on their own individual merits, and we want to take decisions timorously, and lots of decisions are taken timorously. But some decisions, because of their nature and their complexity and some of the investigation work that has to be undertaken, will unfortunately take longer. Some of them will be determined by the range of other investigations that are required into issues that may arise in the planning process. But our objective is to try to take decisions as swiftly and as timorously as possible, but we have to make sure that's done through due process.
I'd like to circle back a little bit to Gaza, and it's an FOI that I got back last week. It's to do with the human rights due diligence checks on the arms firms. I asked when was the last time a human rights due diligence check was performed on a variety of different companies. And with the exception of one firm, which was Base Systems, none of them had a human rights due diligence check since October 7, 2023. The likes of Leonardo, for example, that makes the missile targeting systems for the F-35 jets that are currently flying over Gaza and have killed countless people. The last time that a human rights due diligence check was performed on Leonardo was 2019. Is that acceptable?
Well, I think what I'd have to look at is the timing of any individual decisions that were taken.
2023 was when Leonardo was last given funding from the Scottish Government.
But that must have been assessed at the time by Scottish Enterprise as part of that process.
Well, according to the FOI I got back, a human rights due diligence check was not.
I'll go and have a look at that, but these checks have got to be applied in all circumstances.
Okay, and circling back again to one of my sort of first questions, you're saying that you want to do everything that you can. I don't understand how not taking a boycott, but if you're doing everything that you can, I don't understand why a boycott wouldn't be the obvious answer.
Well, I've tried to explain this already, and so I'll have another go at it. There is, if you explore, like I am absolutely satisfied that no resources from the Scottish Government are going towards the production of munitions, because the purpose of the grant is not for that purpose. So it can't be used for that. If that was to be used for that, it's a breach of the grant. The question you then get into is for a company like BAE Systems, for example, who are...
I'm talking more globally about boycott as well.
Well, but I'm just, you're asking me about financial support, and I'm trying to get in amongst that. So if you're taking a company like BAE Systems, the only thing they're not just doing the one thing, they're also building vessels that protect the coastline of this country. So that's why the kind of blanket stance that you're talking about becomes more complex to evaluate. Now, I don't want you to take away from this interview any reluctance on my part to do as much as I possibly can do, because I'm absolutely committed to that. But I've also got to assess and judge the implications of all the steps that we take. I've got to make sure I've got a legal route to take those steps, and I've got to make sure that we can be effective in what we are requiring to be undertaken. But I don't want you to take any conclusion from this interview other than the fact that I'm exploring every possible avenue we can take to make sure that we are doing everything we can to put as much pressure on the Israeli government as we can.
That's it in my prepared questions, John, but I do have one last one, which I ask pretty much anyone I ever interview. Is there a question I should have asked you today?
I think there's obviously many issues that are kicking about just now. I'm obviously involved in a whole range of different issues domestically and internationally. In the course of the last couple of weeks, I've had extensive discussions with the President of the European Commission, with the President of the United States. You could ask me about any of these, because they obviously cover pretty significant issues affecting the people of Scotland.
In which case, would you like to elaborate on your meeting with Donald Trump?
Yeah, well, I thought it was an opportunity where that I should take, and the majority of people in Scotland, the overwhelming majority of people in Scotland, would think I should take as First Minister of Scotland, to engage with the President of the United States and to put forward Scotland's domestic and international concerns. And that's exactly what I did. I put forward our domestic concerns about the impact of tariffs, particularly on the Scotch whisky industry, as I've set out, and then our international concerns about the situation in Gaza, and imploring him to, as probably, as I told him, probably the only person in the world that can get Benjamin Netanyahu to do something different from the awful course that he is on, and also to take the right actions on Ukraine, which is a critical issue in relation to European and domestic security.
Did you see the National's front page? What did you think? The viral one, convicted felon.
I saw it, yes.
Want to elaborate on that?
It was a front page. It was striking.
It was striking, yeah. Fair play, fair play. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you.